Hi, I'm Sid Davis. I'm the Director of Music and Fine Arts at St. Luke's United Methodist Church, and this is our latest episode of Methodantics, investigating dusty ideas. And just as a note, this is our final episode in this season. We're going to take a break for the summer, and then we will see you in the fall. And I'm here with two wonderful colleagues. The first one is Justin Bair. Justin will introduce himself and our
Well,
guest.
as Sid said, this is our last of the season. We saved the best for last, so we'll have our guest introduce himself today. My name is Justin Bair. I'm an associate director of worship and music here at St. Luke's. My primary responsibilities are worship coordinating, and we kind of started Methodantics for really for me and people like me who I'm employed to help everyone understand what happens in the service, which means I need to know more about what happens in the service and why we do those things and all of those elements and aspects that hopefully help our congregants worship better. And so I have learned a lot doing these series, and even before these series when I would just sit on Sid's couch and ask him these hard questions. And so I evidently we exhausted his expertise because we started bringing other people in a few episodes ago.
That was like episode 2. You exalted my expertise months ago.
So you do see we have our guest today. I will let him introduce himself.
My name is Hart Morris. I am no longer employed. I retired from, my wife and I were on the staff at Asbury Methodist Church from 1992 through 2012, and we retired on our 20th anniversary. And that this was our first and only Methodist encounter, but it was the 20 of our favorite years. And I will say unabashedly and proudly, as I've thought many times, the connection that we got to Asbury was through Sid, who casually mentioned one day, Asbury, Tulsa is searching for a new worship director, and I think you should investigate that. And I thought, I don't know that, don't know that church. And they had neared a decision and already, but they reconsidered and said, well, despite your boots and your hair, we'd love to have you come. So 20 years later, we retired. But
it's Oklahoma after all. So
it is. And we'd spent 16 years in Texas. So we had a brief sojourn in Tennessee. But after all,
I just want to see to it that all my friends are happy. However, just a point of personal privilege here. We moved to Houston in 1986. We knew no one, absolutely no one, and became fast friends with Hart Morris. And I had a hard job and he helped save my life just knowing him. And he moved away. He left me. So I'm not bitter, but anytime you're ready to just end that field trip and come home, I am ready.
Bless your heart. We left Texas fully expecting to go back at some time. So there's still hope. I'm still drawing breath, so I can still have a hope of someday moving back to the Texas, where Texas is a state of mind.
Well, let me say, when Justin came on board, and part of his responsibility was handbells, and he didn't have a lot of experience with handbells. I said, I know the perfect person, Hart Morris. We're going to get him down here, and he's going to solve all your problems, answer all your questions. And Hart is one of the most talented musicians, composers, conductors, handbell expert extraordinaire, and the world recognizes that. And have always been happy to say, yes, I know Hart Morris very well, boots and all.
Well, you're either just trying to be too kind, or you're just outright lying. Because when you say that Justin had limited experience with handbells, I had absolutely zero experience with handbells. And Sid's like, well, as part of your new job, you're the handbell director. So good news is I could read music and I can wave my hands and keep people together, but otherwise knew nothing. And he said, you know what we need to do? There's a guy whom many consider to be a rock star of the handbell world, were his words.
Really?
And he said, Hart Morris, you need to know Hart Morris. And that was an absolute privilege to spend pretty much a full day with just around bells and Hart going, okay, let's start from the basics. Here's what these things are called. And here's what these symbols mean. And let's talk about how to actually ring these things so you can tell other people. And then we followed that up with kind of a area clinic where we had, I want to say maybe close to 30 ringers that day. And we got to play a couple of your pieces and some other pieces that got us jump starting for the fall, which was great.
Well, it was a fun day. It was a privilege to be back in Houston, of course, but to be with you all. It was a treat to meet some of your people. I had not been in St. Luke's in a long time. It'd been a good while. And so it was just great to be back. And any opportunity that we have to go back to Texas, just for their fun, we have a lot of friends, and it's wonderful to be back. Once you cross the Red River, heading south, it's a totally new day. And everyone, and I've noticed this as we cross the river and drive through Sherman, everyone is in a mad rush to get to Galveston for some reason. The speed limit makes no difference, and lane changes are, it's amazing. So many things change south of the river. Always a treat.
Kind of like
always an adventure.
It's kind of like red lights. It's optional.
That's exactly right. It doesn't matter. And Dallas is, of course, a real treat. So it keeps us sharp.
A real treat. This episode is just full of lots of euphemisms.
It is, and no tricks.
It's a real treat. So you're not just a handbell director, or we're not just a handbell director. You're a music director, but
right.
I came to know you first through handbells, and that's where I know a lot of your expertise is in. So, what is your history with handbells? How did that kind of become a thing for you?
My background before college was percussion, and that's what I wanted to be. I thought I would be an orchestral percussionist, and that's what my teacher planned, and my first year at Oklahoma City University was with that in mind. And then I switched to Oklahoma Baptist and switched to church music. I'd sung in the youth choir as a high schooler. That was it. I wasn't a soloist. I was a drummer, and all the baggage that goes with he's a drummer, and added a little bit different color with the orchestral thing and band. So that was great, but I loved it. I still do. And rhythm, it was one of my things. And so we got to Houston in 1973. And one Sunday morning, a couple walked into the office between Sunday school and church and said, "Do you know what handbells are?" And I said, "Sure, I met handbells just before we moved here from Florida." And it was very interesting. He said, and they said, "Well, we'd like to give a set to the church." Step right into my office and let's talk. And so they wrote a check for a 3-octave set of handbells. And we ordered a set. That was in the fall of 73. And in January, I think it was, of 74, we got the bells arrived and we were off and running. That's how I got started with it. I was intrigued by it, one, because of the rhythmic aspect of it. I could invite people who could be involved in the music ministry who didn't sing, didn't want to be in the choir, couldn't sing, but as long as they could count, and weren't too nervous about doing something like this. I found that it's, for some people, it's just a nerve-wracking experience. But if you can get over that and enjoy the ensemble, the sounds, and the fun. So immediately, 2 of our groups, an adult group and a youth group, began to do very well, and we were playing outside the church for concerts within a couple of years. The pastor, Milton Cunningham, said to me, Well, basically it was, well, big boy, now what are you going to do? You got to do, what are you going to do with handbells? He said, I think you ought to find the person that knows the most about it and just go pick their brain. And so that's what I did. I called Donald Alured, who was then kind of the godfather of handbells. I didn't have any better sense than just to call the godfather and say, hey, can I come over and play? And he said, well, sure. He didn't know me from anybody. Pardon?
He was in South Louisiana, right?
Yes, he was at he was in South. He was the director at the First Methodist Church in
Lake Charles.
Bingo, thank you. It was Lake Charles. Marty and I, my wife, drove over there one Friday night, spent the day with the kid, with him, listening to his choir rehearse, and they were just spectacular. No one at that time was doing what Don did, and so we watched the rehearsal all morning, and then sat with him for a couple of hours after lunch. I came home and did what he said, and it worked. He was very practical, very generous man, very kind. He's a very kind man, and he contributed so much. He really is the legend in American handbell ringing, and the things there, innumerable folks owe him so much of their knowledge in this area. So that's how I found it. I took to it. It helped that our youth group and the ladies group both became pretty well proficient. They just soaked it up. Also, we asked Don to bring his choir over to Westbury and play a concert one Sunday. That helped too. So
handbells are hard. Not to frighten anybody off, but I think handbells are very hard. I mean,
well, I agree. I agree with you, and I think getting over it's like fear of flying. If you can just get over the initial fear of it, it's not quite as bad as you thought. And folks, I don't really understand the fear, and I don't mean to be it's a scary thing, but for some reason, I have two. I'm responsible for these 2 or 3 bells or 4, whatever you end up with on your assignment. And if I don't do it, it's not like having 20 altos in your choir. It's up to you, and that's part of the fun, part of the challenge. Working with other folks is a very fun, usually a fun experience, and learning together. It also helps if the experience level is somewhat the same. If everyone's a beginner, that's helpful. If it's an advanced group, it helps that everyone's advanced. But in reality, in the real world, it's not always that way. It's like any other church music situation. What you get in the lab at school before you graduate with music majors is not always what you're going to have when you hit a church, and you have 15 sopranos and 2 men, and you have to make the best out of it and make it work. That's the challenge. That's part of the fun. The bells are a unique. Handbells are a unique. It's a unique sound. There are ups and downs. For we should have bells. We shouldn't have bells. We don't. Today, the cry from some is it doesn't fit what we're doing with our contemporary music today. And there are folks who are endeavoring to write music and do things that it can contribute to what you're doing, and putting it in a niche and expecting that this is all you can do with it is a part of the challenge too, to be able to branch out and try something new. But creativity, I think, that's what I found. I think coloring outside the lines is is a big part of it. And finding different ways, rather than just playing an offertory or a prelude, or incorporating it into some other aspect, playing it with the hymns, or and of course a solo piece is fine depending on what it is, but trying to find different ways to use it in the worship service, and to contribute something to what's happening in that hour. How you use it is, I think, a critical part of the effectiveness of it. We do a thing at Christmas Eve. Well, we did. Well, no, they still do it. We are back at Asbury now, singing in the choir, playing in the orchestra when needed, that kind of thing. So I'd say we do this now. I don't lead it, but we're there. And we closed the service with what they call the ringing in of Christmas, and we put bells. We would put bells all over the sanctuary, ringing a peal, just a simple diatonic peal, going da 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 da, over and over again. And then, as you sing "Joy to the World," it's very simple. Bill Payne shared this with me 30 years ago. And we did. William Payne was at Bucknell for many years as the choral. I think he was head of the choral department. He is retired as well, but still very active in the bell corps. And it was a wonderful addition to the service. And Christmas Eve, and they do it at all the traditional services still. So simple things like that. It's not difficult at all to do. And the more bells, of course, you have, the more exciting it is. So again. Thinking outside of the box is, I think, critical. So
let's talk a little bit about history of handbells. How did this become a thing in church? How did this particular kind of instrument become a thing alongside vocal choirs, and then we have now these bell choirs? Where did that all start?
Well, I have not researched it in depth, but most all of the stories agree. This is a descendant of tower bells, English tower bells. Change ringing, which was the beginning of it. There were carillons, which is different. Carillons are played from the keyboard. And usually change ringing is done with a peal of bells, 4, 8, 12 bells, each one they're in a tower. And the change ringing is simply ringing those bells in all the alterations of that you can do. If you have a four bell peal, you ring those 4 bells in all of the orders, in order 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 4, 3, 2, 1, whatever it is, 8 bells, 12 bells. Of course, the more bells you have, if you ring all the iterations, it takes forever. But everyone has a rope, everyone's in the tower, and they learn how to ring and how to do it in the right order.
Each person has one bell.
That's right. And they're weight hundreds of pounds. So it's a pretty physical art. When I honestly do not know who decided we should ring tunes with those, put handles on them, and bring them inside. I've never heard that story. Ellen Jane Lorenz was one of the early bell gurus, and she had researched a lot of these things and had a lot of these answers, but she's no longer with us. But she's a part of the Lorenz publishing family, and in the early 50s, the American Guild of English Handbell Ringers was formed in New England, and that was the beginning of what now is the Handbell Musicians of America, which is the major handbell guild that fosters music, handbell music in now around the world. But a group of where specifically it's started has escaped me. Margaret Shirkliff was one of the early pioneers, and they started ringing in her home small group, and it just grew from there. And because they were ringing tunes, there were not mega handbell sets in those days, of course, so you were relegated to playing hymns or folk songs, whatever they could play to arrange it. And much of that was centered in churches. And I think that's why that was for a long time the main outlet was church music for worship service. And that's all. It could have. There were bells in schools when we discovered it, but it was still predominantly in churches. And I think that's why they call them choirs. Usually, choirs is a group of singers. Now, and that never occurred to me for years. A handbell choir. Okay, we have a handbell choir. We have two handbell choirs. Okay, do they sing? No, they play bells. Oh, okay. Well, why is it a choir? I don't know. And so now they're called ensembles, and you have the Houston Bronze Ensemble, and you have the Tulsa Festival Ringers, and the XYZ Ensemble, and there's a group, Sonos, Campanile. These are not church-centered groups. These now are auditioned, some professional groups who play. They're auditioned, and there are anywhere from 12 to 15, 18 people in them, and they are not church related at all. And this is one of the things about the composition of handbell music. You can use it with children with 8 bells and play Jesus Loves Me in whole notes, or you can play beat or toccata, depending on. It all depends on the abilities of the players and the facility that the director has to make that happen. Yeah, and what I found, as I watched this develop, is that it is with any leader, if the director has the vision to make it work, you can do almost anything that you can lead those people to do. And many folks who get into bell choirs, I just can't do that. I can only play these two. Don't ask me to do anything else. These are my bells, and I'm not going to give either one of them to Regina because these are mine. And learning to share is a vital part of it. The more complicated the music, sometimes, the less ability you have to play all that you need to. So sharing is a big part of it. I think that's more than you asked for, but
handbell people that are dedicated with a capital D.
Rabid. They're rabid folks.
I wasn't going to say that, but yes. The R
yes. There was a lovely woman at Asbury who was a violist. I guess she still is. And we were discussing something one day, and she said, "Yes, I'm going to a viola seminar." Oh, okay. Well, I guess that's not as odd as I thought, because I've been to handbell seminars, and there are still people who do not understand what handbells are or who have never heard of them, and that it's okay. It's still a pretty young art in America, and yet there are Japanese, South Korean, Australian, English choirs. They're all over the place, and the Asian groups are phenomenal. They're just frighteningly wonderful.
Virtuosic.
They are. That's exactly right.
I have a question. Do you remember back a long time ago when I was actually at a church in the Dallas area, there was a church musician, I want to say he was Methodist, from Wichita Falls, who had a youth handbell choir that was they were just crazy good. But he was sort of a rebel in that he did things like they didn't wear gloves and they didn't polish their bells. And I mean, I knew some handbell people that really looked down their nose at him,
Oh
despite
yeah.
the fact these kids could play like the wind. Who was that?
Was it? Well, I think it was Kent Knappenberger, but I'm not sure.
Uh,
That
they,
sounds like it. Uh,
they played
Ed
from
Duncan.
memory.
Well, yeah. Excuse me. Go ahead.
They played from memory. I mean, they were just wildly good.
And that's the thing about it. There are certain things. The folks, as you described, who don't wear gloves and don't do this, and we don't do that, and uh, the primary purpose, this is my personal bias, is to make good music, to make it not sound like just a rudimentary thing that we're doing because it's different and it's odd. It's not a curiosity. It's not a circus act. And that's been one of the big obstacles for handbell music in America, is that it's just a cute, quaint parlor trick, an odyssey, excuse me, not an odyssey. Sometimes it is trying to find where you're going, but an oddity was my word. And getting over the novelty and making the music is the point. And so Don Algarid, he treated these bells like precious objects, and then his kids would tear into something and just blow the windows down. But when it was over, these lovely precious bells, we got to take care of them. And it's just like good stewardship of anything. Not wearing gloves. We wear gloves. That's what we always did, because that's what I learned to do, and that's what most everybody does. Not a big deal. The problem is not, as long as you polish them when you're through with that rag and get the fingerprints on them, it's not really that offensive.
Yeah.
If you leave a fingerprint on a bell long enough, it will etch that imprint into the finish on the bells. Good stewardship is the best reason for me, not just because it looks pretty, but because if you don't take care of your instrument, it's not going to last as long. It's not going to work as well. And so that it's a simple matter for me of preservation and making sure that you're taking care of what you've got. That the first 3-octave set that couple bought for Westbury was $1,200.
There's a lot
for
of
37 bells in 1973, and you can't. That'll hardly buy a case, a box to put them in now. And some of the big, the number 2 bells, the bigger ones. I mean, $1,200 won't buy some of those, for one. So it's just a matter of preservation and good stewardship.
for our friends at home. The whole discussion about wearing gloves or not wearing gloves, bells tarnish easily, and if you touch them, the oil from your hands tarnishes the bells. And it's common practice to polish them, to have a bell polishing party, or to polish them at the end of every rehearsal. There are some choirs for whom, dare I say, the care of the bells sort of becomes a religion. And I mean, they don't, somebody not wearing gloves or coming close to the bells without gloves on would be, I mean, they'd be thrown to the lions.
Unclean, stay away. Yeah,
That's exactly right.
it's like leprosy.
Can I ask you a composition question? I know there was a time that you were getting up, you did your composition work every morning at like 5 o'clock, is the way I remember it. Didn't you get up really early and do that? Do you still?
Yes. Well, the reason I did that is because I didn't have time to do it at any other time during the day. In the shank of Asbury, we were blowing and going just like you all do. For a long time, I was all I had at Asbury, And in order to do, I had no help as a secretary, but it was just me for everything. And so that's the only time I could do it, was at 5 o'clock. And I did that for a long time. I don't do that now because I don't have to.
But you're still composing.
Yes, sir. I am. I have experienced what I heard retired people say for a long time. I don't know how I did what I did when I had a job, because I've got so much to do now. Of course, there are some of us don't have anything to do. I'm blessed that I do have a lot to do with, grandchildren and this, and we're involved at Asbury, and our bell choir has started up again. We've had 3 rehearsals, and we're going to play in 2 weeks. And we live out, so we don't live in Tulsa anymore. So we have a little drive to get there. And so I do it when I can. And I'm blessed to have 2 or 3 assignments right now for, folks who would like to have a piece. So I'm honored that some things, it is out of sight, out of mind. And you think, well, here I am. I think I'll go mow the lawn because I don't have anything else to do. But I'm out of sight, but I still have a couple of things to do. So it's really a blessing. And Marty and I have, in fact, our 3 of our adult granddaughters are coming to visit this weekend. And so it'll be a big hullabaloo. But it's just, no one's bored here. And we live in the country, so there are rural things to accomplish.
Do you still have horses?
We have 1 now. Yeah, the max, the most we've had is 3. For various reasons, they're not with us. We've had this for about 2 years.
So the cowboy boots, they're not just a fashion statement.
No. No, I grew up with a horse, and I thought I would never have another one, and then boom, here we are.
Yeah,
So it's been great.
You've hinted a little bit at this, but I want to ask kind of more directly, and pardon the pun here, where do you feel like we are on kind of the bell curve of the popularity of handbells? Is this something that, from the time that it's made a transition from, being up in the steeple with ropes and into people's hands, is it continuing to grow? Did it have kind of a heyday and it's sort of diminishing now? Or where are we, let's say nationally and then even globally with handbells?
Or as you observed, as I said, rabid ringers, the folks who really love it, it will always be something to do. It's like singers who will always be singing. COVID, the COVID phenomenon has decidedly curtailed a lot of it. Publishing is slowed down. People just aren't playing. People aren't buying. Choral music, I think, is pretty much has had an effect as well. But because you have a quartet or 12 people or 10 in a close proximity, that hasn't been happening for the last year. And so everything has been put on pretty much on hold. Things that have been being published are for quartets, small ensembles, 8 bells, no tables, bingo, 12 bells, and that's what it Bill Ingram. And so those who've been able to do that have been have kept it going. The Asbury thing, when we got back, they had already stopped doing the bells. They weren't doing it, and so nothing has happened until now. And there's our director has said, I want to get this back, because it was a going thing when we left. And so that has been a inhibiting factor. And the contemporary music, as I earlier mentioned, if you don't think uh, if you don't have a traditional worship service, if you have a church that has no uh, traditional music, there's virtually no place to put that anymore because of what I said. That's not a contemporary sound. We just can't do that. And so it's sad because my education was eclectic, even before there was contemporary Christian music, which started a long time ago. I realized that, but there was always both sides of it. And I was taught to be eclectic. Everyone doesn't like Bach. Everybody doesn't like Bill Gaither. Try to do some of all of it because you have people in your congregation who like different things. And so that's the way I tried to do. And well, that's what I did. And it's the same with the bells. And some people, when you say, oh no, let's go, the bells are out, let's go to lunch early. You know, and I've heard similar things like that along the way. But and I had one friend at Asbury told me, he said, I don't like classical music. What classical? Well, it's what you do in the traditional service is classical music. Okay. There was no dissuading him from that. Occasionally we did classical music, but it wasn't predominantly that. So we did everything. And that's what I think you could do with the bells. And you can play Bach chorales with the bells. You can play down by the riverside on the bells. You know, it just depends on how you want to use it.
I don't have a lot of handbell experience, as you know, we've talked about it many times. You've helped me many times, but I believe what I see in your music that's different, especially early on when I was first dabbling in it. Your music, because you're a percussionist, is rhythmically really challenging and really different than what other people write. And that's super refreshing. You have to have a good group, but
Yes.
it's rhythmically very, very different than a lot of the stuff that's published.
Well, I take that as a compliment, and I appreciate your observation. But I did not set out to do that. I just wrote what my experience took me. Because I played in jazz band in high school, the stage band, I mean, and then I played in Oklahoma City Symphony for a while, so I had an eclectic background. And then when I got to church music school, I said, "Do it all." Okay, great. And so that I just did what I felt like should be done, and I thank you for that observation, Sid. Because that's what I tried to do. I didn't try to make it hard. I tried to make it interesting, interesting to hear, and interesting and fun to play. And that was my objective. And if I accomplished it, then I was glad.
Yeah, I think the interesting to hear part is super important. And I mean, to the point that I think some of the stuff that you do in your music, especially early on when you were writing, I don't know, a couple of decades ago, I would think would cause people to go, can you do this with a handbell? Can you do these rhythms with a handbell? It just had not been done. But also, I also like what you said about bell cars have to move beyond being thought of as a parlor trick. Because I think often it's, oh, this is just unusual. It doesn't have to be musical, which is one reason I knew that Justin was going to be able to be a successful handbell director, because he's so musical. And then the bell cars would play musically.
That's right. You can learn the mechanics of it. And you can learn, you don't have to assign the bells this way. You can do this, you could share, you can do this, you can make a hat, you can make a brooch. Sorry. But it's the music that I'm so sorry, I just popped out. You can, it's making the music with whatever you have. Whatever you're using, you can make a meaningful experience with a banjo and a tuba if you are looking for the music. And that's what Alyar had said before he said anything to me that day. The music is what you're trying to do, and putting the right note on the right beat is just the first step.
Right.
There are so many other things. And frankly, one of the difficult things that I think we experienced in the handbell world is tempo. For most choirs, that's an exaggeration. For many of us, every piece that's published is published to be played too fast. Mozart in Amadeus, that's too many notes, Mozart. Remember, the emperor said, Mozart, too many notes. And if you have too many notes per beat, people get frazzled a little bit, and you have to encourage them. This is not a frightening experience. You won't be injured. Just trust me. Flight of the Bumblebee at 80 is not Flight of the Bumblebee. It's a different piece altogether.
Right.
And it is at the tempo and that it was written to be played at. And so it's a completely different piece if you don't watch the tempo. It's just like playing a piece in 3 sharps and say, well, we don't play sharps. We're going to play in C. We don't need those sharps. So we're not going to play, it's almost that bad to me, but that's my personal fetish. So it's the music that counts, and that's what you're trying to do. Admittedly, you can run over people trying to get there. But if you understand, if you have a heart for people and helping them be better, you're there. I've seen it before when the music is the goal, but the people you're doing it with, the people who you're trying to work with to help get better and provide that music are equally as important. And how you approach it is a critical piece of the furniture. So it's just like anything else. I mean, you look what you guys do at St. Luke. And one of my vital memories of Sid, when you got there, is what you did with the youth choir. What you've done everywhere you've been with the youth choir. And because it's the kids that are involved, it's what you're doing with them, changing their lives, make a difference. That's what it's about. And music in the church, this is just my opinion, is a tool. You're trying to make a difference in the life of the church and in the individual people that you're working with. Handbells is just one way to do it, but it's not the main event.
Right.
The people are.
Community is the main event.
That's right. Yeah.
I think we could, and Sid would agree, we could easily make this interview a full-length feature film. Because you're just
roll the credits.
you're delightful and just a pleasure to have here, and we could absolutely keep going, but we are gonna start to wrap it up. And so we do a question at the end of every episode, just to help everyone get to know us a little bit better, so that it's not all about church, but it's about also who these people are that are telling us these things. And so just something personal about us. This question is, what is your favorite season? As we're now in spring and it just turned, like the Gulf of Mexico just belched on us. So it feels very, very Houston springy. And so I'll go first. I've always lived, I believe I was born too far south and I live too far south. And I either need to find some elevation or just go up in latitude, because I'm not like a hot, sweaty summer boy. I would live with on the ground most of the year if I could.
I spent my first 2 years of life in Alaska. I'm an Air Force brat, and I'm never happier than when it's freezing cold. Never happier. The colder, the better.
Wow.
How about that?
That's amazing.
Your Pure Sound trip to Canada when it was like negative double digits.
It was, the wind chill was 40 below the day we went ice skating.
Oh,
It was great.
oh man, that's amazing. Well, I empathize. I was born in state is one of our favorites. We've been able to go to Alaska twice, my wife of many years and I. And it was an unforgettable trip both times. We did the ship for a week and we did the land for a week. And it was amazing. We love Alaska and hope to be able to go back. However, my wife is not a cold person. And my personal favorite season is spring, because we've just come out. I mean, a little over a month ago, we all had that freeze. I mean, it's devastating. It was such a relief. But a week ago, it was 33 degrees one night. This is goofy, but we're coming out of it now. I can go out and work the horse. I can go get out and do things. And the summer, I dread the summer in Oklahoma because it's a fryer. And so, I'm going to enjoy this. I would love to go back to Alaska, though. Oh, buddy.
Well, I'm sure I speak for Sid when I say that you're not allowed to go back to Alaska until you come to Houston first, and then you're free to go wherever you like. We're always available for lunch if you just want to 5 a.m., compose a little, and drive down.
Bless your heart. I love it.
You can wear your boots.
Okay. You got a deal. It's work. That works. That works. I appreciate you both, and I'm so glad you're getting to work together. And as I say, the time we had at that workshop was just wonderful. Yeah. And I appreciate you both in what you're doing. It's wonderful to watch. So,
well, and we still have a piece actually that you wrote for us that COVID just closed off. We stopped rehearsing just like everybody else, and so we have a piece yet to be played. And we're excited. We're going to be starting some rehearsals also pretty soon,
right.
And back to pretty close to normal, as we would say, in the fall. And that one will be in the folder.
Excellent. I look forward to hearing it.
Yeah.
That's great.
Justin's going to tell you how you can get in touch with us if you have a question. I always mess up the email address, so I always let Justin do it.
You always say that you mess up the email address, but you always tell me to do it. So you've never actually tried.
I did. I messed up really bad once, and I'm not going to do it again. You have a young brain. Go.
If you want to ask us any questions or ask Hart any questions about Methodantics or about future episodes, you can always email one of us. You can email Sid S. Davis at stlukesmethodist.org or my name, J. Bair, at stlukesmethodist.org. And we'd be happy to pass that information along or do what we can to answer it. So thank you again, Hart, for your time today. And it was an absolute pleasure.
It's an honor to be with you, and I really appreciate it. It's been fun. It's great to see you both again. Thank you.